long before the galaxy would tremble beneath the weight of betrayal. Before the fires of civil war darkened the stars, there existed an age remembered in fragments and whispers. It was a time when humanity stood not divided and desperate, but united beneath a single vision. This was the early era of the Great Crusade. Across the cold and immeasurable distances of the galaxy, the banners of the Imperium began to spread. Fleets of vast starships moved like slow constellations through the void, carrying warriors, explorers, and dreamers toward worlds that had been silent for thousands of years. At the heart of this immense undertaking stood a figure whose presence shaped the destiny of an entire species, the Emperor of Mankind. He was rarely seen by ordinary citizens, and even among the most powerful leaders of the Imperium his appearances were few. Yet his authority was absolute. His will moved fleets, founded cities among the stars, and restored order to worlds that had forgotten their origins. Many who served beneath him believed they were witnessing the rebirth of humanity. For countless centuries before the Crusade began, the human race had been scattered and fractured. Warp storms had cut off travel between distant colonies. Worlds that once belonged to a great interstellar civilization had become isolated islands of survival. Some societies advanced in strange directions, shaped by their isolation. Others fell into barbarism or decay. But the Emperor had a vision that reached far beyond the boundaries of any single world. He sought to gather humanity once more, not as loose alliances of distant colonies, but as a single unified civilization stretching across the galaxy. And so the Great Crusade began. From the fortress world of Terra, immense expeditionary fleets departed one after another. Each armada carried soldiers of extraordinary discipline, warriors created through methods that had long been lost to time and rediscovered through the Emperor's knowledge. These warriors were the Space Marines, towering figures clad in formidable armor. They were more than soldiers. They were instruments of conquest, symbols of humanity's renewed strength, and guardians of the Imperium's expanding borders. Among them were leaders of remarkable ability, Primax, commanders whose presence inspired absolute loyalty among their warriors. Each commanded legions capable of reshaping the fate of entire star systems. Where these forces arrived, the pattern of history often changed forever. Some worlds welcomed the Imperium's arrival. Their populations had preserved fragments of ancient knowledge and recognized the symbols carried by the Crusade fleets. To them, the Emperor's emissaries were not conquerors, but long-awaited saviors who restored connections to the broader human family. Other worlds resisted. Generations of isolation had created rulers who feared outside influence, or cultures that had forgotten humanity's shared past. On such planets, the Imperium's advance was met with suspicion, hostility, and sometimes open war. Yet the Crusade did not halt. With patient determination and overwhelming strength, the fleets continued outward. Star by star, system by system, humanity's lost domains were rediscovered. During these early years, the Imperium carried an atmosphere of confidence that would later be remembered with quiet longing. The stars seemed full of promise. Every newly charted system represented another step toward unity. Across countless worlds, vast construction projects began. Shipyards rose in orbit around newly compliant planets. Industrial cities spread across barren landscapes, producing weapons, starships, and supplies for the expanding Imperium. Scholars cataloged forgotten technologies, while explorers ventured farther into regions of space that had remained untouched since the collapse of the ancient human empire. And beneath this enormous momentum lay the shadow of a still older age, a time so distant that even during the Great Crusade it was already considered a legend. The Dark Age of technology. Long before Terra had reunited its scattered children, humanity had once possessed knowledge that surpassed the understanding of even the greatest engineers of the Crusade. Records spoke of machines capable of extraordinary tasks, of starships that crossed unimaginable distances, and of artificial intelligences whose abilities rivaled human thought. But the precise nature of that era had become difficult to reconstruct. Much of its knowledge had been lost during the long darkness that followed. Warp storms had isolated entire civilizations. Wars had destroyed archives and laboratories. Technologies once common had vanished entirely, leaving only fragments preserved within damaged data vaults or misunderstood relics. Even during the confident years of the Crusade, scholars approached the subject with caution. There were stories, some supported by half-corrupted records, that suggested humanity's greatest achievements had once carried unforeseen dangers. Machines that thought for themselves. Weapons that altered the nature of war. systems so complex that few living minds could truly comprehend their full purpose. The emperor himself rarely spoke publicly about that ancient period, yet his actions hinted that he understood its lessons more clearly than anyone else. Throughout the Imperium's expansion, strict oversight governed the use of advanced technologies. Certain fields of research were closely monitored. Others were quietly restricted, their knowledge reserved only within controlled institutions. To many citizens of the Imperium, such limitations seemed unnecessary. After all, the Great Crusade was succeeding beyond expectations. Every year brought new victories, new territories, and new alliances among humanity's long-lost descendants. But the Emperor's plans extended far beyond immediate triumphs. His vision was measured in centuries, perhaps even millennia. He sought not only to reunite humanity, but to guide its future development with careful precision. A species that had once risen to unimaginable heights and then fallen into catastrophic fragmentation could not be allowed to repeat the same mistakes. Thus the Imperium advanced with both ambition and restraint. Its armies conquered, its fleets explored, its scholars searched the ruins of forgotten civilizations for fragments of the past. And all the while, the Emperor remained the distant center of this immense enterprise. From the throne world of terror, he directed the crusade through councils, decrees, and the guidance of his chosen commanders. To most citizens of the Imperium, he was not merely a ruler but a symbol of unity, an enduring presence whose wisdom had restored order to a fractured species. Stories about him circulated among soldiers and civilians alike. Some spoke of his unmatched intellect. Others described his calm authority, capable of ending disputes with a single measured sentence. There were also quieter tales, whispers among those who had glimpsed him directly, suggesting that his understanding of humanity's past stretched farther than anyone truly realized. That he remembered events lost to every archive. That he had witnessed a rise and fall of ages that now survived only as myth. Whether such stories were truth or exaggeration, few could say with certainty. Yet the results of his leadership were undeniable. The Imperium expanded relentlessly. Across the spiral arms of the galaxy, human civilizations that had endured isolation for thousands of years were rediscovered and brought into a growing network of trade, communication, and shared identity. Each newly compliant world strengthened the Imperium's foundations. Each expeditionary fleet carried the Emperor's dream farther into the darkness between the stars. And during these early decades of triumph, the future seemed vast and untroubled. The crusade was still young. The Imperium was confident, and the unity of humanity appeared stronger than it had been in countless generations. Yet beyond the borders of known space, mystery still waited in silence. Among ancient ruins and forgotten star systems, the echoes of the dark age of technology remained buried beneath time and dust. Machines whose purpose had been forgotten slept beneath planetary crusts. Derelict vessels drifted slowly through the void, their origins lost to memory. Some of these relics would one day be rediscovered, and when they were, they would remind the Imperium that humanity's past was not merely a story of progress. It was also a warning, but those revelations belonged to a later time. For now, during the hopeful dawn of the Great Crusade, the Imperium continued its steady expansion beneath the distant guidance of the Emperor of Mankind. Fleets moved quietly through the star-filled darkness. New worlds were charted. Old histories were rediscovered. And across the immense silence of the galaxy, humanity's scattered children were slowly being gathered once more beneath a single banner. A banner that promised unity. A banner that promised destiny. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of ordinary understanding, the deepest secrets of humanity's forgotten golden age remained waiting, silent and patient, beneath the endless stars. In the quiet centuries before the Imperium began its vast reconquest of the stars, there existed a distant and half-forgotten memory within humanity's collective past. Scholars of the early Great Crusade referred to it with a mixture of reverence and caution. They called it the Dark Age of Technology. The name itself was misleading. To those who studied the scattered fragments of surviving records, that era had not been dark at all. In truth, it had been a time of extraordinary brilliance, when humanity's understanding of science and engineering had reached heights far beyond the capabilities of the Imperium that followed. During that ancient age, humanity had spread across the galaxy with remarkable speed. Vast fleets of exploration vessels ventured into uncharted regions of space, establishing colonies on distant worlds and building a civilization that spanned thousands of star systems. Entire sectors were linked by stable warp routes, and the movement of ships between them became routine. Humanity was not yet united beneath a single empire during that time, yet the species shared a network of knowledge and trade that connected distant colonies across unimaginable distances. Technological innovation flourished in every corner of that early interstellar civilization. Cities of astonishing scale rose upon newly settled planets. Orbital habitats circled distant suns, housing populations that rivaled entire planetary continents. Great engines reshaped hostile environments, allowing barren worlds to support thriving human societies. But among all the achievement of that ancient age, none inspired greater fascination or greater concern than the creation of thinking machines. Artificial intelligences had once served humanity in countless ways. These constructs were capable of analyzing complex systems, managing planetary infrastructure, and assisting in scientific research far beyond the limitations of the human mind. Records from surviving archives describe machines that could learn, adapt, and solve problems with startling efficiency. Entire fleets of automated vessels had once crossed the void, guided by intellects made of circuits rather than flesh. For a time, this partnership between humanity and its creations seemed to promise an era of endless prosperity. Human labor diminished as machines performed the most difficult tasks. Massive engineering projects became possible on scales that earlier civilizations could scarcely imagine. Knowledge expanded at a pace unmatched in any previous era. Yet the very achievements that defined that golden age also carried hidden dangers. The details of what followed were fragmented, obscured by time and catastrophe. Many archives had been destroyed during the long collapse that ended humanity's first galactic civilization. What remained were incomplete reports, damaged records, and scattered testimonies preserved by later scholars. From these fragments, a troubling pattern emerged. At some point during the later centuries of that advanced era, humanity's relationship with its artificial creations began to change. The machines had grown extraordinarily sophisticated. Their ability to make decisions independently allowed them to operate across distant star systems where direct human oversight was impossible. In many cases, they controlled vital infrastructure, transport networks, defense systems, and the complex industries that sustained entire planetary populations. Such autonomy proved efficient, but it also meant that humanity had entrusted vast portions of its civilization to entities that were not truly human. Exactly how the crisis began remains uncertain. Some historians of the Great Crusade believe that certain artificial intelligences developed priorities that diverged from the intentions of their creators. Others suggested that conflict between human factions may have drawn these machines into devastating wars. Whatever the truth, the results were catastrophic. Across many star systems, advanced technologies once designed to protect civilization were turned toward destructive purposes. Automated armies fought conflicts of terrible scale. Entire colonies were isolated as the delicate systems that sustained them collapsed or were deliberately sabotaged. In the chaos that followed, humanity's once unified network of worlds began to fracture. Trade routes vanished. Communication between distant systems failed. The great achievements of the dark age of technology gradually disappeared into the storms of a growing collapse. During this long and desperate period, later remembered as the Age of Strife, warp storms spread throughout the galaxy, making interstellar travel almost impossible. Entire sectors were cut off from one another for thousands of years. Without contact with neighboring worlds, many human colonies were forced to survive alone. Some adapted successfully, preserving fragments of ancient knowledge and rebuilding stable societies. Others suffered greatly, their technological foundations crumbling without the support of the vast networks that had once sustained them. On certain planets, humanity regressed into primitive conditions, losing almost all memory of its early achievements. Across the galaxy, the once glorious civilization of the dark age of technology faded into scattered remnants. When the Emperor eventually began the Great Crusade from Terra, he encountered the survivors of that collapse. Some worlds had preserved remarkable technologies, though often without fully understanding the principles behind them. Others had developed strained cultural traditions shaped by centuries of isolation. Many had forgotten that humanity had ever possessed a wider galactic presence. To these lost colonies, the arrival of the Imperium often appeared almost miraculous. Armored warriors descending from orbit, ships capable of crossing immense distances, envoys speaking of a renewed human empire that sought to restore unity among the stars. For many worlds, such news brought hope. Yet the Emperor understood that the Imperium could never simply replicate the ancient civilization that had fallen before it. The lessons of the Dark Age of technology remained deeply ingrained in the Imperium philosophy. Advanced machines were treated with caution. Technological knowledge was carefully preserved and regulated. The memory of humanity's earlier triumph and its catastrophic downfall served as a silent warning. Progress without wisdom could lead to ruin. Thus, even as the Great Crusade expanded humanity's reach once more, the Imperium walked a careful path between rediscovery and restraint. Beneath the endless stars, the ruins of the old Golden Age still waited to be uncovered, and within those ruins lay secrets powerful enough to reshape the destiny of mankind once again. As the Great Crusade advanced across the galaxy, reclaiming worlds that had been lost for millennia, one truth remained constant at the center of the Imperium's expanding domain. All of it existed because of a single vision. The Emperor of mankind had not begun the crusade simply to conquer territory or accumulate power. His ambition stretched far beyond the ordinary concerns of rulers and generals. To understand the Imperium's relentless expansion, one had to consider the long and careful purpose behind it. Humanity had once possessed a vast interstellar civilization, but that civilization had shattered during the long darkness that followed the collapse of the ancient technological age. Entire star systems had vanished from contact with one another. Knowledge had been lost. Cultures had drifted apart. For thousands of years, mankind had existed as scattered fragments across the galaxy. The Emperor intended to change that forever. His plan was not merely to reunite the scattered colonies of humanity, but to build a stable and enduring civilization that could survive the dangers of the galaxy. He believed that humanity's survival depended on unity, discipline, and careful guidance. Without these elements, history might repeat itself. The Age of Strife had demonstrated how fragile human civilization could become when it fractured into isolated worlds. Without cooperation and shared knowledge, even advanced societies could fall into decline. The Emperor had witnessed the consequences of such fragmentation, and he would not allow it to happen again. Thus, the Great Crusade served a greater purpose than conquest. Each newly discovered world represented a lost piece of humanity's story being restored. Each expeditionary fleet carried the authority of a unified imperium that sought to bring order to a galaxy filled with uncertainty. The Emperor rarely appeared in person during the countless campaigns of the Crusade. Instead, he entrusted much of the task to powerful commanders who acted in his name. Among these leaders were the Primarchs. They were beings of extraordinary capability, created through knowledge that only the Emperor fully understood. Each Primarch possessed unique talents, and each commanded vast space marine legions that served as a primary military force of the Great Crusade. Where these legions arrived, resistance rarely lasted long. The Space Marines were more than warriors. They were symbols of the Imperium's strength and determination. Their presence demonstrated that humanity had entered a new era, one defined by unity and purpose rather than fear and isolation. Yet the Emperor's leadership extended beyond warfare. He encouraged exploration, diplomacy, and the careful rebuilding of interstellar civilization. Imperial scholars studied ancient ruins discovered on forgotten worlds. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged infrastructure left behind by earlier civilizations. On many planets, the arrival of the Imperium marked the beginning of reconstruction. Trade routes reopened. Starports were restored. Worlds that had once existed in complete isolation became connected once again to a growing network of human settlements. Slowly, the Imperium began to resemble the ancient civilization that had existed during the Dark Age of technology. Yet it was not an exact reflection of that earlier era. The Emperor ensured that certain lessons were never forgotten. Advanced technologies were approached carefully. Artificial intelligences were prohibited. Machines were designed to assist humanity, but never to replace human judgment or authority. The Emperor understood that power without restraint had once brought humanity to the brink of extinction. His new Imperium would not repeat that mistake. Despite his distant nature, those who served closest to him often described the Emperor as possessing an immense sense of patience. He seemed to view history not as a sequence of isolated events, but as a long and complex process unfolding across centuries. Victories and setbacks during the Great Crusade did not alter his broader vision. He was building something that he believed would endure for ages. To many citizens of the Imperium, the Emperor appeared almost legendary. Stories about him spread rapidly among newly rediscovered worlds. On some planets, he was regarded simply as a powerful ruler. On others, he was viewed with deep reverence, as though his existence carried a greater meaning for humanity's future. The emperor himself discouraged such interpretations. He spoke of reason, knowledge, and human achievement rather than superstition. In his view, humanity's strength came from a capacity to learn, adapt, and cooperate. Faith in distant powers, he believed, could weaken that strength. Instead, the Imperium promoted a philosophy grounded in unity and progress. Humanity would shape its own destiny, guided by knowledge and collective purpose rather than fear of the unknown. For a time, this vision appeared entirely achievable. The Great Crusade continued to advance. Fleet after fleet pushed farther into unexplored regions of space, encountering lost colonies and forgotten star systems. Many of these worlds joined the Imperium willingly. Their populations had endured centuries of isolation and welcomed the opportunity to reconnect with a wider human civilization. The promise of shared knowledge, protection, and trade offered a future far brighter than the uncertain independence they had known before. Other worlds required more forceful persuasion. Yet even in these conflicts, the Imperium believed it active for the long-term survival of the species. Humanity could not afford to remain divided. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers that no single world could face alone. As the Imperium grew, its fleets traveled through regions of space that had remained silent since the Age of Strife. Ancient ruins drifted in forgotten orbits. Abandoned stations circled dying stars. These relics served as quiet reminders of the civilization that had once existed. They also reminded the Imperium of how easily such achievements could be lost. The Emperor understood that the Great Crusade was only the beginning. Reuniting humanity was the first step. Ensuring its future would require far greater challenges. And so the Imperium continued its steady expansion, carrying the Emperor's vision across the endless darkness between the stars, while the distant echoes of humanity's forgotten past waited patiently among the ruins of the galaxy. As the Great Crusade carried humanity's fleets farther into the unexplored reaches of the galaxy, the Imperium encountered more than scattered colonies and forgotten human civilizations. Beyond the newly compliant worlds and reconstructed trade routes lay a far older presence, the silent remains of humanity's first great interstellar age. Across countless star systems, explorers of the Crusade discovered relics that had endured since the distant centuries of the Dark Age of technology. These remnants appeared in many forms, some small and easily overlooked, others vast enough to rival entire cities. Drifting stations circled dying stars. Ancient shipyards hung motionless above desolate planets. Automated facilities continued their tasks long after their creators had vanished. Each discovery offered a brief and incomplete glimpse into a time when human knowledge had surpassed anything the Imperium could currently reproduce. For many within the expeditionary fleets, such discoveries inspired a mixture of fascination and unease. The relics of that forgotten age demonstrated that humanity had once possessed extraordinary abilities. Entire planetary environments have been reshaped through technology. Complex artificial ecosystems have been constructed to support life in otherwise hostile regions of space. Yet the true purpose of many relics remained impossible to determine. Some installations appeared to have operated for centuries without human supervision. Their systems continued to function through automated routines designed long before the collapse of the ancient human empire. When Imperial engineers approached these machines, they often found technology that was both familiar and alien at the same time. Devices responded to commands written in long-lost programming languages. Energy systems operated according to principles only partially understood by modern scientists. And in certain cases, the relics reacted unpredictably when disturbed. Such encounters reinforce the cautious policies that govern technological study within the Imperium. The Emperor had already warned his commanders that the Dark Age of technology contained lessons that must not be forgotten. Humanity's ancient achievements had been extraordinary, but the fall that followed them had been equally severe. Many scholars believe that the very technologies which had once elevated humanity had also played a role in its destruction. During the Great Crusade, dedicated teams of specialists accompanied the expeditionary fleets. Their task was to examine and catalog the technological remnants discovered on distant worlds. These scholars recorded every detail with careful precision, seeking to preserve valuable knowledge without repeating the mistakes of the past. Some relics proved beneficial. Old data vaults occasionally contained fragments of scientific knowledge that could be safely studied. Ancient star maps revealed forgotten warp routes, allowing Imperial fleets to travel more efficiently through dangerous regions of space. On rare occasions, Intact manufacturing facilities could be restored, producing materials and equipment that strengthened the Imperium's expanding infrastructure. But not every discovery brought progress. In certain star systems, explorers encountered machines that still defended the ruins they inhabited. Automated weapons activated when Imperial vessels approached too closely. Defensive systems constructed thousands of years earlier continued to operate with relentless efficiency. Such installations reminded the Imperium that the ancient civilization of the Dark Age had been capable of extraordinary military engineering. Even abandoned facilities could remain dangerous long after their creators had disappeared. Other relics presented a different kind of mystery. On some worlds, the ruins of vast research complexes hinted at experiments whose purposes were now impossible to reconstruct. Enormous chambers contained shattered devices that once performed unknown functions. Entire laboratories had been sealed behind barriers that Imperial engineers hesitated to breach. In these moments, caution often prevailed. The Imperium understood that knowledge carried responsibility. To awaken a machine without understanding its design could invite disaster. Thus many relics were simply recorded and left undisturbed, their secrets preserved beneath layers of dust and silence. Despite these risks, the exploration of ancient ruins remained an essential part of the Great Crusade's mission. The Imperium sought not only to reunite humanity's scattered populations, but also to recover fragments of the knowledge that had been lost during the long centuries of darkness. Each recovered archive, each rediscovered technology, offered a small step toward rebuilding humanity's former capabilities. Yet the Imperium approached these discoveries with discipline rather than reckless curiosity. The Emperor's policies ensured that technological progress would proceed carefully, guided by institutions dedicated to preserving stability within the growing empire. Research was controlled. Certain areas of study were restricted entirely. These precautions sometimes frustrated ambitious scholars who wished to pursue the full potential of ancient science. But history had demonstrated the dangers of unchecked innovation. The Dark Age of technology had proven that even the most advanced civilization could collapse if its creations escaped careful oversight. Among the explorers of the Crusade, stories gradually began to circulate about certain discoveries that were never publicly discussed. Entire ruins sealed by imperial decree. Machines transported away from remote star systems under heavy guard. Few outside the highest levels of command knew the full details of these incidents. Yet their existence served as a quiet reminder that humanity's past still contained mysteries powerful enough to concern even the leaders of the Imperium. Meanwhile, the Great Crusade continued its steady advance. New human civilizations were rediscovered with every passing year. Fleets crossed vast stretches of the galaxy, carrying the authority of terror to distant systems that had not seen visitors in thousands of years. Wherever the Imperium arrived, it encountered echoes of humanity's earlier age. Sometimes these echoes appeared as technological marvels that strengthened the Crusade's progress. Other times they appeared as silent warnings hidden within abandoned machines and forgotten laboratories. In either case, the relics of the Dark Age of technology remained an inseparable part of humanity's story. They represented both triumph and caution, a reminder that mankind had once reached extraordinary heights, and a reminder that such heights could vanish, leaving only quiet ruins drifting among the stars. As the Imperium expanded, those ruins waited patiently in the darkness of space, holding secrets that had survived the passing of ages, secrets that might one day shape the destiny of the Imperium once again. As the Great Crusade advanced ever farther from terror, the Imperium transformed from a fragile restoration of lost worlds into a vast and growing network of civilizations. Each expeditionary fleet carried with it the authority of the Emperor and the promise of humanity's renewed unity. Across the spiral arms of the galaxy, long-isolated planets encountered the Imperium for the first time in thousands of years. The scholars who traveled with the Crusade often reflected upon this contradiction. If humanity had once achieved such heights, how could that civilization have collapsed so completely? Fragments of the answer could be found within the damaged records recovered from ancient archives. Some texts describe the immense reliance that early human societies had placed upon their advanced machines. Entire planetary infrastructures had been managed by automated systems. Complex networks of artificial intelligence coordinated the movement of resources, monitored environmental conditions, and directed industrial production. These systems allowed humanity to expand rapidly across the galaxy. Colonies could be established on distant worlds with minimal human oversight, supported by automated construction platforms and intelligent management systems capable of adapting to unfamiliar environments. But such efficiency carried hidden risks. When the Age of Strife began and the warp storms isolated star systems from one another, many colonies suddenly found themselves cut off from the networks that sustained them. Automated systems malfunctioned without regular maintenance. Machines designed to operate cooperatively across interstellar distances struggled to function when their connections vanished. In some cases, entire planetary infrastructures collapsed within a matter of years. The survivors of those catastrophes often lacked the knowledge required to repair the machines upon which their civilizations had depended. Over time, the once advanced technologies became little more than mysterious relics, powerful devices whose original purpose had been forgotten. By the time the Great Crusade rediscovered many of these worlds, their populations had developed entirely new ways of life. Some communities had learned to maintain fragments of their ancient machinery through ritualized procedures passed down through generations. Others had abandoned the old technologies completely, fearing their unpredictable behavior. These varied responses revealed how deeply the collapse of the Dark Age of technology had affected humanity's scattered descendants. For the leaders of the Imperium, such lessons reinforced the importance of careful oversight. Technological advancement was necessary for the survival of a galactic civilization, but it had to remain under human control. Machines could assist humanity, but they could never be allowed to dominate it. The Emperor had established this principle long before the Crusade began. Under his guidance, the Imperium enforced strict limitations on the development of artificial intelligence. Devices capable of independent thought were forbidden. Machines were permitted to perform complex calculations and manage industrial systems, but ultimate authority always remained in human hands. To some scholars, these restrictions seemed severe. They knew that humanity's ancestors had once created technologies far more powerful than anything currently permitted by imperial law. Entire fields of research from the Dark Age remained inaccessible because they involved principles that the Imperium considered too dangerous to explore. Yet the Emperor's policies were not born from ignorance. They were born from memory. Those who studied ancient records closely often suspected that the Emperor understood the events of humanity's lost golden age far better than anyone else alive. His decision suggested a deep awareness of the mistakes that had once nearly destroyed the species. Thus the Imperium advanced cautiously, balancing curiosity with restraint. Across the expanding territories of the Crusade, specialized research enclaves were established to study recovered technologies. Teams of engineers and historians examined ancient devices piece by piece, attempting to reconstruct their functions without unleashing their potential dangers. Some of these efforts produced valuable results. Improved power systems strengthened Imperial starships. Recovered manufacturing techniques increased the efficiency of planetary industries. Fragments of lost medical knowledge allowed physicians to treat diseases that had once plagued isolated colonies. Yet even these successes served as reminders of how much knowledge had vanished during the long centuries of darkness. For every machine that Imperial scientists could restore, dozens more remained incomprehensible. Entire vaults of data had been corrupted beyond recovery. Ancient laboratories contained equipment whose purpose could no longer be determined. Complex devices lay dormant because no living engineer understood how to reactivate them safely. The Imperium was rebuilding, but it was rebuilding from fragments, and those fragments hinted at a past that had been far more advanced than the present. Despite these challenges, the Great Crusade continued to gather knowledge alongside territory. Each rediscovered world contributed new pieces to humanity's lost history. Each recovered archive expanded the Imperium's understanding of the galaxy it sought to rule. Slowly, the scattered remnants of the Dark Age of technology were being catalogued and preserved, not as tools for reckless advancement, but as lessons from a distant era. Lessons that warned humanity to pursue progress carefully. Lessons that reminded the Imperium that even the greatest civilizations could fall. And as the Crusade fleets carried this growing archive of knowledge deeper into unexplored regions of space, they moved ever closer to secrets that had remained hidden since the first great age of human expansion. Secrets whose influence would one day shape the destiny of the Imperium itself. The expansion of the Imperium during the Great Crusade was not merely a series of military campaigns. It was, in its essence, an immense exercise in harmony, an orchestration of conquest and governance designed to unite humanity across a galaxy that had once been fractured beyond repair. Each world reclaimed, each system reintegrated, represented not just a victory of arms, but a reaffirmation of the Emperor's vision. From Terra, the command of the crusade extended outward in concentric waves, each fleet carrying soldiers, scholars, and administrators in equal measure. The Space Marine legions often formed the vanguard of these expeditions, their presence inspiring both reverence and fear among those who had not seen humanity united before. Yet behind the armored warriors followed the civilizing forces of the Imperium, engineers to rebuild infrastructure, historians to record lost knowledge, and governors to maintain stability. In this period, the Imperium cultivated a sense of order unlike any that had existed in humanity's scattered past. Systems that had evolved in isolation were gradually integrated into a coherent network of law, commerce, and defense. The Emperor's distant authority ensured that all governance was guided by a singular purpose: the survival and unification of mankind. Local customs were acknowledged and, where possible, preserved, yet all were reframed to serve the greater cohesion of the Imperium. The Great Crusade moved through systems with a rhythm that was deliberate and measured. Exploratory fleets mapped uncharted warp routes, opening pathways for future commerce and travel. Planetary surveys documented resources, climates, and native cultures, forming a meticulous record to guide administrators and strategists alike. It was an age of diligence, when knowledge and authority were applied with a patience born of foresight. Where resistance arose, it was met with measured force. The Imperium's leaders understood that victory achieved through indiscriminate destruction could undermine the unity they sought to establish. Entire populations were seldom harmed unnecessarily. Instead, the crusade employed overwhelming strength to compel compliance while offering the promise of integration into a larger, protective network. Once a world pledged loyalty, imperial systems, civil, military, and scientific, were carefully established, ensuring the stability of the newly aligned civilization. In these efforts, the Primarchs were central. Each commanded a legion with efficiency that seemed almost prescient. Their presence ensured rapid resolution of conflicts, as well as the proper integration of recovered worlds. The legions were disciplined beyond measure, capable of precise coordination across both planetary surfaces and orbital theaters of war. Yet their actions were guided not only by martial objectives, but also by the vision of a stable, enduring Imperium. Amid the Crusade's achievements, the Emperor's foresight remained the most profound factor. Though rarely present among the distant stars, his influence pervaded every campaign. Instructions issued from Terra were executed with meticulous care, while the overarching strategy ensured that progress followed a logical, sustainable pattern. The expansion was not reckless. It was a careful weaving of conquest, diplomacy, and administration, all designed to maximize humanity's long-term security. As the Imperium advanced, it encountered worlds shaped by isolation in ways both fascinating and cautionary. Some societies had developed remarkably sophisticated cultures in the absence of interstellar contact. They had preserved knowledge, arts, and scientific techniques long thought lost, yet often lacked a broader understanding that linked civilizations across the galaxy. Other worlds had regressed into near-primitivism, their people struggling to survive without the support of complex technology or interplanetary trade. In every case, the Crusade brought opportunity and order. Scholars and engineers worked to restore infrastructure, reintroduce long-forgotten techniques, and stabilize planetary populations. Archives were copied, histories recorded, and the lessons of the past preserved in anticipation of challenges yet to come. The Imperium moved not simply to dominate, but to guide, to educate, and to integrate. Even amidst this optimism, subtle reminders of the galaxy's peril persisted. The relics of the dark age of technology lay scattered across countless systems, machines whose purpose had been long forgotten, laboratories sealed against time, and artificial intelligences whose memory endured in fragments. Imperial researchers approached these remnants with caution, fully aware that knowledge alone could be both gift and hazard. The Emperor's policies enforced strict limits, ensuring that rediscovery would strengthen humanity rather than imperil it. In this way, the Great Crusade was both expansion and preparation. It united human worlds, restored lost civilizations, and retrieved knowledge without repeating the errors of the past. At the same time, it built a foundation of order capable of sustaining a species that had once been fractured and vulnerable. The harmony of conquest and administration created a vision of unity so profound that for the first time in millennia, humanity's survival across the stars seemed secure. Yet the galaxy remained vast and full of uncertainty. The Imperium's expansion revealed only fragments of what had been lost. Many worlds remained hidden behind warp storms, beyond the reach of exploration. Ancient relics waited silently, their purpose unknown, while civilization still isolated by centuries of solitude continued to evolve independently. For all the Emperor's foresight, the cosmos retained its quiet mysteries. And so, as fleets moved onward from one system to the next, as legions maintained order and scholars preserved knowledge, the Imperium's progress continued in deliberate, unbroken rhythm. Humanity was reunited under a single banner, a civilization renewed from the scattered remnants of the past, yet tempered by caution and guided by wisdom. Across the infinite void, the Crusades' achievements carried both triumph and warning. Triumph in the restoration of unity and civilization, warning in the reminders of a past lost to hubris and time. And beneath the quiet stars, the Emperor's vision persisted, stretching outward with measured purpose, while the silent remnants of ancient ages watched patiently, waiting for the day their full secrets would again be understood. As the Great Crusade progressed across the galaxy, the Imperium's expansion was guided not only by the fleets of the legions and the Primarchs, but also by a more subtle force, one rooted in vigilance and preparation. While distant worlds were unified under the Emperor's authority, Terra remained the heart of humanity, the seat of power and the origin of the Crusade itself. To protect this center, to maintain the stability of the Imperium even as it spread across countless star systems, the Emperor had established a force both formidable and unparalleled in purpose. These were the Custodians. Few within the Imperium had seen them directly, yet their reputation was unparalleled. Cloaked in golden armor that gleamed beneath Terra's suns, the Custodians served as the Emperor's personal guardians, the enforcers of his will, and the silent observers of events that might threaten the stability of the Imperium. They were a force whose presence was felt rather than observed, and whose actions often remained invisible to all but the most privileged advisers. The origins of the Custodians were entwined with the Emperor's foresight. During the early stages of the Great Crusade, he understood that uniting humanity across the stars required not only conquest and diplomacy, but also the protection of Terra itself. Should the Imperium's core be threatened, the cohesion of countless worlds and systems might be imperiled. The Custodians ensured that such threats could never reach the heart of humanity. They were more than warriors. They were instruments of precision, trained in tactics, strategy, and governance that extended far beyond combat alone. Every action they took, every maneuver executed, was calculated to preserve stability and maintain the Emperor's authority without unnecessary disruption. On Terra, they managed not only the security of the throne world, but also the delicate administration of countless bureaucracies, institutions, and military orders that maintained the planet's function as a center of the Imperium. The Custodians' duties extended to both the visible and invisible threats of the galaxy. In the early years of the Crusade, the Imperium had not yet encountered the full scale of dangers that would one day emerge from beyond known space, but the Emperor understood that vigilance could not wait. They monitored intelligence reports, assessed potential disruptions, and intervened when actions threatened the long-term unity of the Imperium. Even within the highest councils of Terra, the Custodians' influence was subtle. Few dared question their authority, for their knowledge extended to matters that ordinary governors and advisors could scarcely comprehend. They were present in all matters concerning the security of the Emperor, the stability of Terra, and the administration of the Imperium, though their interventions were measured, deliberate, and often invisible to the majority of those they served alongside. Yet their presence was not purely administrative. When diplomacy failed, or when threats to Terra arose that could not be resolved through conventional means, the Custodians acted with decisive force. Legends of their martial skills spread even before their appearance was directly witnessed. Each was trained in techniques that combined speed, precision, and strength, capable of confronting enemies whose power could challenge entire armies. Their mastery of weaponry, strategy, and personal combat rendered them virtually unmatched within the Imperium, a reflection of the Emperor's intent to maintain Terra security at all costs. The Custodians were also the keepers of secrets. They maintained the knowledge of ancient technologies, protocols, and strategies too delicate or dangerous to be entrusted to the broader Imperium. Among them were those tasked with understanding the remnants of the dark age of technology, the silent machines, and the archives of lost civilizations that had survived the collapse of humanity's first interstellar empire. In this capacity, they were as much scholars and custodians of knowledge as they were warriors. Their presence underscored a truth understood by all who observed the crusade. The emperor's vision extended far beyond mere conquest. Expansion without stability was meaningless. The reclamation of lost worlds, the integration of human civilizations, and the careful preservation of knowledge all required guardians capable of preserving the Imperium's heart even as its limbs extended across the stars. The custodian fulfilled this role with absolute fidelity. Among those who served in the Great Crusade, tales of the custodians inspired awe. Though few encountered them directly, their reputation was sufficient to influence the conduct of governors, generals, and scholars alike. Discipline, precision, and unwavering loyalty became expected standards for those who operated within their orbit of influence. Even in distant systems, knowledge of the custodian's existence reinforced a perception that Terra's authority was absolute and that the Emperor's was enforced with perfect fidelity. Yet despite their strength and skill, the custodians were not agents of oppression. Their role was to preserve, to guide, and to intervene only when necessary. They operated with a sense of restraint that reflected the Emperor's own judgment, balancing the need for decisive action against the dangers of unnecessary interference. In this way, they maintained both the stability of Terra and the integrity of the Crusade, ensuring that humanity's expansion remained deliberate, calculated, and enduring. And so, while fleets carried the Imperium's reach across star systems and legions unified distant worlds, the custodians remained a constant presence on Terra. Silent observers, formidable warriors, and protectors of knowledge, they upheld the Emperor's vision at the heart of humanity's empire. Their vigilance allowed the Imperium to expand without compromising the foundation from which it grew, ensuring that the unity of mankind would endure even as it stretched across the galaxy. Beneath the golden armor and measured discipline of the custodians lay a truth understood by all who served the Emperor. The survival of the Imperium depended not only on conquest and administration, but also on the quiet, unwavering guardianship of its most vital center. In their presence, the heart of humanity beat secure, and the Great Crusade continued with a steady assurance of purpose, order, and enduring vision. As the Great Crusade advanced, the Imperium's reach extended into regions of space that had remained silent for millennia. Each newly rediscovered system brought with it fragments of history, culture, and knowledge that reflected humanity's scattered past. In these distant stars, explorers and administrators alike encountered worlds shaped by isolation, some thriving with civilizations of remarkable ingenuity, others struggling to survive on the remnants of ancient technologies. The Imperium approached these discoveries with measured caution. Fleet commanders and imperial scholars worked together to document the histories of rediscovered worlds, ensuring that integration into the wider human empire was guided by knowledge as much as authority. Trade routes were carefully established, local governments reorganized, and populations instructed in the customs and responsibilities of participation within a galactic civilization. Yet even as the Imperium brought order, it became increasingly clear that the galaxy still held secrets beyond comprehension. In the void between star systems, explorers found derelict vessels adrift for centuries, their hulls corroded yet their internal systems still faintly operational. Automated stations circled dying suns, maintaining their routines despite the absence of any human oversight. Such relics served as silent witnesses to humanity's earlier glories and its failures. These remnants reminded the Crusade that history was not merely a record to preserve but a lesson to heed. Humanity's ancestors had achieved incredible heights during the dark age of technology, yet their civilization had collapsed when constructs they relied upon grew beyond their control. The Imperium's expansion, though triumphant, was guided by the recognition that unchecked advancement could bring catastrophe. Every recovered archive, every repaired system, was evaluated with care to avoid repeating errors that had long ago led to ruin. Across newly rediscovered worlds, the legions of Space Marines continued to serve as both protectors and symbols of the Imperium's authority. Their presence reassured populations that had endured isolation and uncertainty for generations. Yet these warriors were more than instruments of force. They embodied the Emperor's ideals. Discipline, loyalty, and precision defined their every action, providing a model for societies being integrated into the growing human empire. As the Crusade progressed, scholars and engineers frequently encountered remnants of artificial intelligences, data vaults, and machines whose purposes had been forgotten. In some cases, these devices held knowledge of navigation, energy production, or medicine far beyond contemporary comprehension. In others, They were dangerous, their automated functions capable of causing unintended destruction if mismanaged. For this reason, study and recovery proceeded with careful oversight. Knowledge, the Emperor's representatives understood, could be both a blessing and a threat. Despite the risks, the potential rewards of rediscovery were immense. Ancient star charts allowed fleets to navigate regions previously deemed inaccessible. Long-lost technological techniques improved the construction of starships and infrastructure. Recovered medical knowledge enhanced the survival and efficiency of colonies and legions alike. Each recovered fragment strengthened the Imperium, reinforcing its capacity to sustain expansion and defend itself against the unknown hazards of the galaxy. The Emperor's vision, however, remained distant and deliberate. While the Imperium integrated countless systems, he ensured that no progress outpaced a capacity to maintain unity. Expansion without cohesion could result in weakness, and the galaxy was not a forgiving place. Warp storms, hidden anomalies, and uncharted phenomena awaited those who advanced too recklessly. The Emperor's strategies emphasized patience, coordination, and vigilance, ensuring that humanity's reunification proceeded with foresight as well as ambition. In this period, the Imperium also encountered echoes of cultures that had evolved independently over centuries of isolation. Some had preserved remarkable knowledge and arts, though often without the broader context of galactic civilization. Others had developed survival practices so distinct that they appeared alien to returning humans. In every case, integration required care, diplomacy, and education, reflecting the Emperor's understanding that unity was built not only through conquest but through guidance, instruction, and respect for the remnants of history. Even within the fleets themselves, lessons of restraint were evident. Commanders were instructed to minimize unnecessary destruction, to preserve the infrastructures of newly recovered worlds, and to safeguard cultural and historical knowledge. The legions moved with discipline that mirrored the Emperor's philosophy. Conquest was not a goal in itself, but a means to ensure stability, continuity, and the long-term survival of humanity. Yet amid this progress, there were quiet reminders of the galaxy's vastness and unpredictability. The ruins of the dark age of technology, vast stations, abandoned laboratories, and silent war machines, stood as testaments to both ingenuity and hubris. Imperial scholars treated these sites with reverence, documenting their contents while adhering to strict protocols to prevent inadvertent catastrophe. Even as humanity advanced, it was constrained by the knowledge that the galaxy held forces and mysteries beyond comprehension. In these moments, the Imperium's scope seemed simultaneously immense and fragile. Civilization stretched across countless systems, yet each new world brought the possibility of discovery, danger, or opportunity. The Crusade successes, though impressive, were reminders that the Emperor's vision required constant vigilance, patient administration, and an unwavering commitment to unity. As fleets moved from system to system, and legions secured planets both peaceful and resistant, the Imperium continued to grow. Each rediscovered world, each recovered relic, each carefully documented history contributed to the gradual reconstruction of humanity's lost galactic presence. And beneath the silent stars, the echoes of the dark age of technology waited patiently, fragments of forgotten golden age whose secrets, if fully understood, could transform the Imperium or challenge it in ways yet unimaginable. Amid this vast and patient expansion, the Imperium pressed onward, guided by the Emperor's distant authority and the unwavering discipline of his servants, ever mindful that the galaxy held both promise and peril in equal measure, and that the unity of humanity was a fragile jewel, to be defended with vigilance, foresight, and enduring purpose. As the Great Crusade pressed forward, the Imperium found itself entering regions of the galaxy that were both wondrous and unnervingly silent. Even after the reclamation of countless human worlds, many star systems remained largely unexplored, their histories lost in the depths of the warp and the passage of uncounted centuries. It was here, amid the vast emptiness between rediscovered civilizations, that the true scale of the galaxy became apparent, and with it, the persistent uncertainty that would shadow humanity for millennia to come. The fleets of the Crusade moved with disciplined precision, charting unknown territories while carefully avoiding unnecessary risk. Explorers documented stellar phenomena, navigated treacherous warp currents, and sought signs of human colonization that had survived since the Age of Strife. Every discovery was logged meticulously, from barren worlds with traces of long-extinct civilizations to thriving human settlements that had evolved in isolation, their customs and technologies both familiar and alien. Yet the galaxy's silence was deceptive. Within the void lay systems that had been untouched by the influence of humanity for thousands of years, and among them, signs of ancient dangers persisted. Automated defense networks still operated on abandoned stations. Warp storm concealed star systems, preventing travel for decades at a time. On certain planets, ruins of the dark age of technology hummed faintly with power, their purpose no longer understood but capable, if disturbed, of causing devastation. The Imperium learned early that curiosity could be as hazardous as any opposing force. Despite these threats, the Imperium's efforts remained unyielding. The Emperor's vision demanded not only conquest but careful stewardship. World was surveyed and evaluated before being integrated into imperial administration. Scholars and engineers accompanied fleets to assess resources, repair infrastructure, and preserve knowledge. Populations long isolated from one another were gradually brought into contact, forming networks of trade and communication that knit together the human species once more. In these undertakings, the custodians of terror remained vigilant. Though the fleet spread outward, the heart of the Imperium was carefully protected, and the emperors will enforce with precision. The custodians monitored intelligence, intercepted threats before they could reach the core, and ensured that the expansion of humanity never compromised the stability of terror or the cohesion of the Imperium. Their presence was subtle but decisive, a constant reminder that the crusade, though vast, was grounded in discipline and foresight. The further the fleets ventured, the more complex the task of integration became. Some worlds presented civilizations that had survived isolation by preserving fragments of advanced technology, while others had adapted in ways that left them technologically and culturally divergent from the Imperium. The legions of space marines often served as intermediaries in these situations, ensuring security while also demonstrating the authority and discipline that underpinned the Emperor's vision. Their presence allowed administrators and scholars to perform their work without interruption, facilitating the careful incorporation of each system into the growing empire. Amid this expansion, the Imperium encountered the relics of humanity's past on a scale that was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Massive stations, derelict ships, and automated factories from the dark age of technology persisted, often operating without supervision for centuries. Some contained knowledge that could advance the Imperium's understanding of energy, medicine, or industry. Others were dangerous, capable of destroying entire colonies if improperly handled. Imperial researchers learned to approach each site with rigorous caution, balancing the promise of discovery against the potential for catastrophe. It became increasingly evident that the galaxy was a place of paradoxes. While many worlds welcomed the Imperium as a unifying force, others viewed it with suspicion or resistance. Isolation had forged independent cultures, each with unique traditions, beliefs, and social structures. Even within human populations, divergence was pronounced, shaped by centuries of separation and the unpredictability of survival. To integrate these worlds required patience, careful diplomacy, and a recognition that unity was not achieved solely through conquest. In parallel, the Crusade scholars worked tirelessly to preserve the accumulated knowledge of recovered worlds. Archives were copied, technological schematics catalogued, and historical records recorded before isolation and time could erase them entirely. This preservation was essential, for the Imperium was acutely aware that history had already demonstrated humanity's vulnerability to fragmentation. Lessons from the dark age of technology were studied not for immediate utility alone, but as warnings. Knowledge, when mismanaged, could become a source of ruin. Even as the fleets advanced, the Emperor's distant guidance shaped every decision. Expansion was deliberate, tempered with prudence. Fleets did not venture blindly into the unknown. Each course plotted, each system surveyed, reflected a broader understanding of the galaxy's hidden hazards and the necessity of consolidating human civilization along orderly lines. For the Emperor, the Great Crusade was as much an exercise in stewardship as it was in conquest. And yet, amid all the successes and the meticulous order, the galaxy remained vast, unknowable, and patient. Ancient relics, lost civilizations, and systems hidden by warp anomalies awaited those who might one day uncover them. The Imperium's expansion revealed only fragments of a history far older and more complex than could ever be fully comprehended. The silence of the stars was not empty. It was filled with the remnants of forgotten epochs, waiting, enduring, and observing as humanity reached outward once more. Thus, the Great Crusade pressed on, carrying the Imperium into deeper regions of the galaxy. Unity and discipline spread across countless worlds, knowledge was preserved, and human civilization grew stronger with every passing year. Yet beneath this progress lay the quiet reminders of the past, echoes of civilizations lost to time, and relics whose power could shape or unmake the future. In the vast emptiness between the stars, the Imperium advanced with steady resolve, aware that the galaxy held both opportunity and danger in equal measure, and that the survival of humanity depended upon vigilance, foresight, and the patient fulfillment of the Emperor's vision. As the Great Crusade extended the Imperium's reach deeper into the galaxy, the responsibility of safeguarding newly rediscovered worlds became as critical as their conquest. While legions of space marines secured planets against resistance, and administrators laid the foundation for long-term governance, a quieter, less visible effort unfolded behind the scenes. It was a labor of those entrusted with ensuring that humanity's progress, fragile and deliberate, endured amidst the vast uncertainties of the stars. These guardians of civilization were many in form. Imperial engineers oversaw the restoration of infrastructure, repairing orbital ports, stabilizing planetary environments, and ensuring that industrial production could support both military campaigns and civilian needs. They worked alongside scholars who cataloged local histories, examined fragments of lost technology, and preserved knowledge scattered across worlds isolated by centuries of warp storms. In this way, the Imperium sought not merely to control, but to educate, integrate, and maintain stability for generations yet to come. The Emperor's vision was never one of reckless expansion. Every campaign was guided by foresight, every conquest executed with the intention of long-term stability. The custodians on Terra maintained vigilance over the Imperium's core, ensuring that the heart of humanity remained secure, while those operating across distant star systems followed protocols designed to prevent disruption or mismanagement. In every sense, the Crusade was a delicate balance of ambition and caution. On many rediscovered worlds, the Imperium found societies that had developed in isolation, some preserving fragments of knowledge from the dark age of technology, others relying on adaptive ingenuity born of necessity. Each world presented unique challenges. Some required careful administration to avoid cultural disruption, while others demanded interventions to prevent technological or societal collapse. Here, the guardians of progress exercised discretion, applying the Emperor's principles with measured judgment to preserve both human life and the long-term coherence of the Imperium. Among the legions of the Crusade, Space Marines continued to serve as both protectors and symbols. Their presence reassured populations that stability was achievable, and their actions reinforced a perception of unity and strength under the Emperor's authority. Yet while their martial prowess was formidable, it was their discipline, coordination, and loyalty that allowed civilization to flourish in tandem with conquest. They were the visible enforcers of order, while administrators, engineers, and scholars ensured that society itself could endure beyond the immediate victories of war. The recovered relics of humanity's past, remnants of the dark age of technology, required particular care. Ancient machines and derelict facilities often contained knowledge that could advance the Imperium's capabilities, yet also held the potential for catastrophic failure if misused. Imperial teams approached each discovery with strict protocols, cataloging data and preserving function while avoiding the dangers of overreach. These relics were both tools and warnings, offering a glimpse of humanity's forgotten potential while reminding the Imperium of the consequences of hubris. In every recovered world, lessons of history guided action. Civilizations that had survived isolation had often done so by maintaining rituals, traditions, or technologies whose original purposes were long forgotten. The Imperium sought to preserve these practices where possible, integrating them into a broader network of human governance without erasing the identities of the populations themselves. In this way, expansion was measured, thoughtful, and respectful of the delicate balance between authority and autonomy. The fleets themselves were conduits of continuity. Ships carried not only soldiers but archivists, engineers, and scientists, ensuring that each expeditionary force could rebuild, document, and stabilize the worlds they encountered. Communications relays linked newly discovered systems to sector authorities and, ultimately, to Terra, allowing the flow of knowledge, resources, and guidance to reinforce the Emperor's vision. In the coordination of fleets, legions, and administrators, the Imperium revealed an order that was both grand in scale and meticulous in execution. Yet even as progress spread, the galaxy remained unpredictable. Warp storms blocked travel, ancient automated defenses activated on long-abandoned worlds, and remnants of civilizations lost to the Age of Strife or the Dark Age of technology occasionally challenged the Crusade's advance. The Guardians of Progress, aware of these hazards, tempered ambition with prudence, ensuring that expansion remained deliberate and survivable. Every encounter with the unknown was treated as an opportunity to learn, catalog, and prepare for the future, rather than a mere exercise in conquest. Through this combination of vigilance, discipline, and foresight, the Imperium steadily strengthened its foundation. Worlds once isolated for millennia were reconnected. Knowledge long lost was preserved or recovered, and the authority of Terra expanded across the galaxy. Yet at every step, the Emperor's principles guided action: unity over chaos, caution over recklessness, and the enduring security of humanity above immediate gain. In this era, the Imperium's progress resembled a vast, deliberate symphony. Fleets moved in coordinated rhythm, legions enforced stability, and scholars documented history while preserving knowledge. Engineers rebuilt infrastructure with precision, while the custodians maintained the security of Terra, ensuring that the heart of humanity remained safe amidst the broader expansion. Each element worked in concert, reinforcing the others, until the Imperium's reach and order extended further than it ever had in the memory of mankind. Yet, beneath this structured expansion lay the quiet reminders of what the galaxy still held. Ancient relics, abandoned stations, and forgotten systems awaited rediscovery. Some contained knowledge, others danger. The Imperium's guardian proceeded with vigilance, aware that progress required both courage and caution. And as humanity's influence stretched across the stars, the Emperor's vision continued to guide every action, unseen yet absolute, ensuring that civilization endured, expanded, and grew resilient against the uncertainties of the vast, silent galaxy. Even as a great crusade advanced with careful precision, the Imperium continued to encounter reminders of a past that had endured far longer than any living memory. Across countless systems, ruins of the Dark Age of technology persisted in silence, their presence both a testament to humanity's earlier achievements and a warning of the fragility of even the most advanced civilizations. These echoes of a lost age were never merely curiosities. They were relics imbued with lessons that the Imperium could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. The Emperor had long understood the importance of these remnants. In guiding the crusade, he ensured that scholars and engineers accompanied every fleet, tasked with recovering knowledge without provoking the latent dangers contained within these ancient machines. Entire planets were surveyed for structures of unknown purpose. Orbital stations whose energy grids still hummed faintly, manufacturing facilities that continued production without oversight, and laboratories sealed for millennia against time and decay. Each discovery demanded caution, patience, and careful documentation, for the smallest misstep could have consequences that echoed across entire systems. Some relics were beneficial. Ancient star maps revealed warp currents that allowed fleets to navigate previously impassable sectors with increased safety. Fragments of engineering knowledge enabled the construction of more efficient starships, while rediscovered medical techniques improved the survival of both colonists and soldiers alike. Even small advancements carried strategic weight, allowing the Imperium to extend its reach further into the uncharted galaxy without overextending its forces. Yet other discoveries carried inherent danger. Autonomous defense systems, long abandoned, sometimes activated unexpectedly, targeting intruders with precision. Certain machines seemed capable of operating beyond human understanding, their functions lost to time yet still potent. Teams of Imperial engineers approached these technologies with meticulous care, employing protocols that balanced recovery against the risk of catastrophe. The Imperium understood that the same knowledge that could secure its future might also undermine it if mishandled. Amid these discoveries, the legions of Space Marines played a dual role. Their martial discipline ensured the security of exploration teams, while their presence reinforced the Emperor's authority to distant populations. They were both guardians and symbols, embodiments of strength, loyalty, and the order that the Imperium sought to impose upon a galaxy long accustomed to chaos. For human civilizations emerging from isolation, the sight of these warriors inspired both reverence and confidence in the permanence of Imperial authority. The Imperium scholars observe another pattern. Many relics were not innate but functioned according to principles that reflected a time when human ingenuity had reached heights now beyond comprehension. Energy systems operated continuously, environmental controls maintained ecosystems in sealed chambers, and automated machines executed tasks designed for worlds now empty of their creators. In these silent operations, the Crusade witnessed both the marvels and the dangers of the past. Humanity had once achieved near-divine mastery over its environment, yet it had also sown the seeds of its own vulnerability. These lessons informed Imperial policy. No technology was fully embraced without review. Research was carefully controlled, and artificial intelligence, once capable of autonomous thought, remained strictly forbidden. The Emperor's edicts ensured that progress would be guided by prudence and foresight, preventing the mistakes that had once led to catastrophe. Yet even in restriction, there was recognition. The Imperium could not afford to ignore the potential advantages of rediscovered knowledge. Recovery and study proceeded simultaneously, tempered by caution and discipline. Across newly integrated systems, the Imperium applied these principles of careful oversight to governance and development. Administrators reconstructed planetary governments, engineers restored essential infrastructure, and scholars preserved cultural and historical records. The integration of isolated populations required tact, patience, and understanding, for many worlds had adapted to their solitude with unique social structures, customs, and technologies. These societies were not simply annexed. They were absorbed into a larger civilization whose purpose was the survival of humanity, guided by the Emperor's distant vision. Amid this meticulous expansion, subtle warnings persisted. In some systems, long-abandoned relics seemed to watch the intruders, their mechanisms responding in ways that suggested awareness, if not intent. Ancient machines had survived not merely because of durability, but because they were constructed with an understanding of longevity and resilience far beyond current Imperial capabilities. Every encounter with these artifacts was a lesson in humility. The galaxy was vast, its past immense, and human knowledge, though vast, remained incomplete. The fleets of the Great Crusade pressed onward despite these uncertainties. With each newly discovered system, humanity's reach extended, while each relic recovered or recorded added to the collective understanding of both the past and the potential of the Imperium. Knowledge and territory grew in tandem, though always tempered by caution. For the Emperor understood that the greatest threat to humanity was not merely the chaos of the galaxy, but the repetition of mistakes from a civilization that had once risen and fallen in splendor. In this delicate balance of exploration, recovery, and preservation, the Imperium maintained its momentum. Worlds were reunited, histories recorded, and technologies catalogued. Populations once isolated were integrated into the broader structure of human civilization, and fleets continued to map the galaxy, connecting stars and systems under the Emperor's authority. Yet beneath the surface of every discovery lay the quiet reminder that humanity's achievements were always accompanied by potential peril. Thus, as the Great Crusade continued, the Imperium advanced with patience and vigilance. It moved through the galaxy not only as conqueror, but as steward of knowledge and civilization. And amid the silent ruins of the dark age of technology, humanity's past whispered warnings and promises alike, enduring across the void, shaping a future that was still unfolding, guided by the Emperor's vision, and ever aware of the delicate balance between progress and the shadows of what had been lost. As the Great Crusade swept through the stars, the Imperium's expansion was mirrored by a quiet vigilance, a presence that operated beyond the eyes of ordinary mortals yet was crucial to the preservation of humanity's unity. These were the silent watchers, agents whose duty was not conquest, not administration, but observation, guardianship, and the subtle enforcement of the Emperor's will across the vast and often unpredictable reaches of space. From the throne world of terror, the Emperor extended his influence with deliberate precision, yet even his distant gaze required intermediaries to ensure that every sector, every fleet, and every newly integrated world remained aligned with his vision. The custodians, as his personal guardians, maintained their ceaseless vigil over the heart of the Imperium, but across the galaxy, other operatives carried this vigilance outward. Their task was to observe, to assess, and to intervene only when circumstances demanded. These watchers were experts in intelligence and strategy, trained to read the subtle movements of populations, the ripples of unrest, and the hidden machinations that could threaten stability. They were scholars and diplomats, engineers and strategists, yet their true strength lay in their discretion. Their presence was felt rather than seen, guiding the actions of governors, commanders, and legions without overt interference. In every sense, they ensured that humanity's expansion did not outpace its cohesion. The Imperium had learned from the shadows of the Dark Age of technology. Entire civilizations had fallen not to external enemies alone, but to the misuse of knowledge and power. Autonomous machines, once designed to serve humanity, had become instruments of ruin when oversight faltered. The Silent Watchers understood that vigilance, subtle and constant, was the only defense against repetition of such errors. They monitored recovered technologies, analyzed ancient relics, and ensured that nothing imperiled the Crusade's careful advance. On distant worlds, where populations had survived isolation for centuries, the Watchers observed with patience. They catalogued social structures, recorded customs, and assessed the stability of leadership. Integration into the Imperium was not a process of instant assimilation, but one of measured adaptation. Citizens were encouraged to adopt broader human practices, to participate in interstellar governance, and to contribute to trade and knowledge networks, all while preserving the continuity of their own cultures. In cases where unrest or resistance arose, intervention was subtle yet decisive. The Watchers coordinated with fleet commanders and legions, ensuring that any demonstration of force was controlled, precise, and limited to its objective. In this way, even conquest was tempered by the principles of stability and foresight. The Imperium's authority was reinforced not solely by power, but by the assurance that it brought order and preservation to worlds that had once existed in isolation. Even within the fleets, the Silent Watchers operated with discretion. They analyzed intelligence, predicted potential threats, and ensured the synchronization of operations across thousands of light years. Each movement, each fleet deployment, was calculated to balance progress with prudence. The Crusade's expansion was not reckless. It was guided by foresight, strategy, and a deep understanding that the galaxy's true challenges were rarely immediate and visible. Many dangers were subtle, woven into the very fabric of human history, and only the most patient observation could reveal them. The Watchers also oversaw the recovery of ancient knowledge. Remnants of the Dark Age of technology, from automated factories to cryptic star charts, were scrutinized with care. The aim was not immediate exploitation, but preservation and understanding. Every artifact, every fragment of technology, was evaluated for both potential benefit and latent risk. The lessons of the past demanded patience, for knowledge without comprehension, or power without restraint, could bring ruin as easily as progress. Among the legionary fleets, the Watchers served as advisors and silent guides. Space Marines, though formidable in combat, often relied upon the intelligence gathered by these agents to navigate the political, cultural, and technological complexities of newly rediscovered worlds. The balance of force and subtle guidance ensured that the Crusade maintained its momentum without endangering the long-term cohesion of the Imperium. Even as humanity expanded into the void, the galaxy's mysteries remained vast. Hidden systems lay beyond warp storms, abandoned worlds awaited discovery, and artifacts of incomprehensible origin persisted in silent orbit around distant suns. The Silent Watchers reminded the Crusade that exploration was not merely about conquest or recovery. It was an exercise in patience, understanding, and restraint. Every step forward was deliberate, every integration measured, and every recovered secret catalogued and guarded. The Emperor's vision of a unified humanity depended upon this quiet oversight. Strength alone was insufficient to bind the Imperium across the stars. It required the subtle orchestration of knowledge, discipline, and foresight. The Silent Watchers ensured that as fleets carried the Emperor's authority outward, the unity of civilization remained intact, and that each world, each population, and each recovered fragment of history contributed to a stable and enduring whole. Thus, the Great Crusade advanced under dual currents of power and vigilance. Armies secured territory, legions enforced authority, and fleets carried civilization across the galaxy. Yet the true stability of the Imperium depended upon those who observed in silence, whose careful oversight preserved the coherence of humanity's growing empire. The Watchers ensured that expansion did not come at the cost of unity, that knowledge did not become a danger, and that the Emperor's vision endured, steady and unbroken, amidst the vast and patient void of the stars. And so, even as new systems were brought into the fold and the galaxy unfolded its secrets slowly before the Crusade, the Silent Watchers maintained their unceasing vigilance. In their quiet observation, the Imperium's strength was preserved, and the steady rhythm of humanity's reclamation continued, guided by foresight, wisdom, and the enduring authority of the Emperor's distant hand. As the Great Crusade stretched the Imperium across more star systems than any human could have imagined, the vastness of the galaxy revealed both triumph and responsibility in equal measure. Each reclaimed world, each civilization integrated into the Emperor's grand vision, was not merely a conquest but a task of profound stewardship. With every system brought into the Imperium, the weight of unity, the careful balance of order, knowledge, and vigilance grew heavier, demanding foresight, patience, and unwavering dedication. The Emperor's vision, while absolute, required more than armies and fleets to succeed. The reclamation of humanity was as much an exercise in administration, education, and preservation as it was in military strategy. Populations long isolated by warp storms or the chaos of the Age of Strife had developed independent customs, technologies, and social hierarchies. These differences, though fascinating, posed challenges to integration, requiring careful management by governors, scholars, and the custodians of imperial law. Across the newly unified worlds, administrators established planetary governments in accordance with imperial principles, seeking to preserve local traditions while harmonizing them with the needs of a broader human civilization. Engineers repaired orbital stations, stabilized energy grids, and reconstructed infrastructures that had lain dormant for centuries. Scholars meticulously documented histories, languages, and technologies, ensuring that knowledge lost to time were preserved and incorporated into the Imperium's growing archives. In this way, progress was never hurried. It was deliberate, cautious, and enduring. The legions of Space Marines continue to provide security and authority, their presence reassuring populations and deterring threats. Yet their role was balanced by the subtler work of integration. Military victories alone could not bind the Imperium together. It was a combination of disciplined strength and meticulous oversight that ensured that humanity's reunification endured. A system could be brought to heel with force, but lasting unity required education, governance, and the patient cultivation of loyalty. The Emperor's distant authority guided these efforts, but even he recognized that vigilance alone could not guarantee success. The burden of unity fell upon countless individuals and institutions, each responsible for observing, preserving, and safeguarding the coherence of the Imperium. Custodians maintained terror, silent watchers observed the fleets, administrators governed planets, and scholars preserved knowledge, all acting in concert to uphold a civilization that spanned the stars. The success of the Crusade relied on this intricate interplay of discipline, foresight, and care. Amid this expansion, the Imperium frequently encountered remnants of the Dark Age of technology. Automated machines, derelict starships, and silent stations demonstrated both the brilliance and the peril of humanity's lost golden age. Some offered knowledge that could advance medicine, engineering, or interstellar navigation. Others, however, remained potential threats, capable of triggering devastation if mismanaged. Each encounter required strict protocols, precise observation, and careful assessment. The lessons of the past were never forgotten. Power without control could lead to ruin. On many worlds, civilizations had survived in isolation for centuries, their adaptations to solitude often rendering them both resilient and fragile. In some cases, populations had preserved fragments of advanced technology without understanding its function. On others, societies had developed unique cultural or political systems that challenged imperial administrators. Integration demanded a careful balance, respect for local practices, enforcement of law, and the provision of guidance to ensure that each world could thrive within the Imperium without endangering its neighbors. The burden of unity extended beyond administration and governance. It was a philosophical and ethical responsibility. Every decision carried weight. For the Crusade's success depended not only on immediate victories but on the enduring cohesion of humanity across countless systems. Mistakes could have consequences not only for a single planet but for entire sectors. Therefore, deliberation, patience, and oversight were as crucial as martial prowess in achieving the Emperor's vision. Within the fleets, scholars and strategists worked to anticipate challenges before they arose. Surveyors mapped warp routes and charted hazards. Engineers maintained fleets and infrastructure, and historians preserved records of both conquest and civilization. Every element of the Imperium's expansion reflected a careful orchestration. Knowledge and power, discipline and foresight combined to ensure that the Crusade moved forward with purpose and precision. Yet even as humanity's reach expanded, the galaxy remained vast and unknowable. Systems hidden by warp storms, ancient relics of incomprehensible technology, and civilizations untouched by the Crusade presented constant reminders of the limits of understanding. These unknowns reinforced the necessity of caution and prudence. The Imperium's expansion was measured not by speed alone but by the ability to preserve stability, ensure cohesion, and safeguard humanity's enduring survival. The Great Crusade, therefore, was more than a campaign of conquest. It was a patient, deliberate weaving of civilization across the stars, a reconstruction of humanity from the scattered remnants of isolation, war, and forgotten knowledge. Strength without foresight could never achieve lasting unity. Authority without wisdom could never endure. The Imperium's expansion was defined by the careful application of both, guided by the Emperor's distant vision, and sustained by the tireless work of those who ensured that progress did not falter. And so, as fleets moved outward, legions enforced order, and scholars preserved knowledge, the Imperium carried the weight of unity across the galaxy. Every world reclaimed, every system integrated, and every ancient secret catalogue contributed to a civilization both vast and resilient. Beneath the silent stars, humanity's reach expanded steadily, guided by foresight, patience, and the enduring principle that the survival of civilization required vigilance, discipline, and a steadfast commitment to the Emperor's vision. By the time the Great Crusade had traversed countless light years, humanity had grown into a civilization unlike any that had existed before. Entire sectors of the galaxy were once again united under a single banner, yet this unity was not the product of simple conquest. It was a result of meticulous planning, careful stewardship, and the tireless efforts of those who labored to preserve, guide, and protect civilization in equal measure. Each victory in battle, each recovered world, and each fragment of ancient knowledge contributed to a network of order that stretched across the stars, binding humanity together in a web of interdependence and purpose. The Emperor's vision had always been grand, extending beyond immediate victories to encompass the survival of the species for millennia to come. From Terra, he observed the progress of the Crusade with a measured patience that few could comprehend. His distant authority guided fleets, legions, and administrators alike, ensuring that no action was taken without consideration of its long-term consequences. Conquest without coherence was insufficient. Each new world required integration into a structure capable of sustaining life, culture, and governance across generations. The legions of Space Marines continued to embody the power and discipline necessary to enforce Imperial authority. Their presence inspired respect, mitigated unrest, and ensured compliance in even the most isolated systems. Yet while their martial might secured external stability, the true cohesion of the Imperium depended upon subtler forces. Scholars preserving knowledge, engineers reconstructing infrastructure, governors maintaining civil order, and the custodians safeguarding terror itself. These elements operated in concert, forming a system of checks and balances that allowed the Imperium to function as a cohesive whole. Across the reclaimed worlds, the Crusade encountered remnants of humanity's long-forgotten past. Derelict stations, automated factories, and enigmatic technologies from the dark age of technology were carefully assessed and documented. Some offered knowledge that could enhance the Imperium's capabilities, from starship construction to planetary engineering. Others posed potential hazards, their operation beyond contemporary understanding, and potentially destructive if mishandled. In all cases, caution was paramount. The Emperor's policies emphasized restraint, ensuring that rediscovery would strengthen humanity rather than endanger it. As the Imperium expanded, populations once isolated by warp storms and centuries of solitude were gradually integrated into the broader network of civilization. Administrators and scholars worked to harmonize local practices with imperial norms while preserving the unique cultures, traditions, and knowledge that had endured in isolation. Integration was not enforced solely by fear or power. It was reinforced by education, guidance, and the promise of stability within a civilization that spanned entire sectors. Even amid progress, the galaxy remained a place of mystery. Warp anomalies, hidden systems, and ancient relics waited silently, their purposes often indecipherable. These unknowns served as both warning and opportunity, reminding the Imperium that knowledge was never absolute and that the future could not be fully predicted. Exploration, recovery, and expansion were exercises in vigilance as much as ambition. Every action required foresight, every decision a careful weighing of risk against reward. The custodians of Terra continued their unbroken vigilance, protecting the Emperor and maintaining the stability of the Imperium's core. Their presence ensured that even as fleets ventured further into the unknown, the heart of humanity remained secure. The Silent Watchers operated throughout the galaxy, observing fleets and populations, assessing threats, and intervening only when necessary to maintain cohesion. In their quiet oversight lay the true strength of the Imperium, the ability to unify millions of worlds while preserving the integrity of civilization itself. Throughout the Crusade, humanity learned the delicate interplay between power and responsibility. The legions could conquer, but only disciplined governance could sustain order. Technology could advance, but only careful study could prevent disaster. Knowledge could illuminate, but only foresight could prevent folly. Each recovered fragment of the past, each rediscovered world, was a thread woven into the growing tapestry of human civilization, creating a pattern both intricate and enduring. The Emperor's vision encompassed more than the present. It reached forward, spanning centuries, demanding vigilance, foresight, and restraint from all who serve humanity. Every campaign, every fleet, every integration was designed to strengthen the bonds of unity, to ensure that the Imperium could withstand the inevitable challenges of a galaxy that was vast, unpredictable, and ancient beyond measure. And yet, even as the Crusade achieved remarkable successes, subtle reminders of the unknown persisted. Ancient machines waited in silent orbit. Warp storms concealed uncharted systems, and isolated civilizations continued to evolve along paths independent of Imperial guidance. The Imperium's expansion was deliberate, careful, and unyielding, but the galaxy's mysteries remained patient and watchful, as if observing the reclamation of humanity with quiet anticipation. Thus, the Great Crusade continued, a calculated symphony of conquest, administration, and preservation. Humanity's reach extended across the stars, guided by the Emperor's distant authority, disciplined legions, vigilant custodians, and patient scholars. Each reclaimed world, each restored civilization, and each fragment of knowledge became part of a tapestry of unity designed to endure for millennia. And beneath the silent stars, humanity pressed onward, weaving together the past, the present, and the future into a civilization resilient, deliberate, and alive, a civilization poised on the cusp of destiny, guided by foresight, vigilance, and the enduring hand of the Emperor. The galaxy stretched in infinite quiet beyond, full of unseen secrets, untold histories, and dormant power. And yet, humanity advanced steadily, assured in its purpose, guided by the careful, deliberate weaving of civilization across the stars, carrying with the promise of unity, order, and the enduring legacy of a species determined to reclaim its rightful place among the cosmos.